They told you pleasure was the prize, that if you worked hard, stayed nice, followed the rules, one day you'd get to feel good. But they forgot to mention, most pleasure isn't a reward, it's a disguise. The scroll, the sugar, the skin, the sound of laughter echoing in an empty room. None of it is evil. But none of it is what you think it is either, because real pleasure doesn't chase you. It doesn't call your name in neon. It doesn't wait in the fridge at 2 a.m., and it sure as hell doesn't leave you emptier than before. Let me ask you something raw. When was the last time you felt full, without needing more? Not full of food, not full of likes, not full of someone else's body or praise, but full, like silence finally stopped being scary, like craving finally stopped controlling you. Carl Jung saw it coming. He said the things we run to for comfort are often the very things that block our healing. You think you're chasing joy, but you're running from something, and it's time we face it. Let's begin here. You wake up, you don't stretch, you don't breathe, you reach for the phone. Before your eyes have even adjusted, you're scrolling, tapping, opening. Why? You don't even know. There's no news, no urgency, just habit. One reel makes you laugh. Another stirs a shadow of envy, another reminds you you're behind, and before you know it, an hour's gone. But the ache? Still there, maybe deeper now. So you get up, eat something, sweet, salty, both. And somewhere between the taste and the guilt, you whisper to yourself, I wasn't even hungry. And you weren't. You were just trying not to feel. Here's the twist most never see. It wasn't dopamine you wanted. It was distance. Distance from the storm inside, from the silence that has teeth, from the ache you never had language for. And this is what Jung meant by shadow. He said we all carry a hidden self, the part we bury beneath brightness and distractions. And pleasure? Pleasure is often the shovel we use to dig ourselves away from it. When you eat without hunger, scroll without purpose, desire without love, you are not choosing joy. You are choosing anesthesia. And here's the devastating truth. Most of what we call pleasure isn't pleasure. It's escape. It's not the high, it's the relief. From awareness, from honesty, from ourselves. But that relief comes with a price. Because every hit of empty pleasure deepens the hunger for the real thing. And when we don't get that, we feel broken. But hear me, you are not broken. You are conditioned. Conditioned to mistake stimulation for connection. To think that satisfaction lives in the next scroll, the next snack, the next stranger. But it doesn't. Let me take you back. You're 6 years old. You cry. No one comes. No one asks why. But the moment you smile, even if it's forced, they cheer, they clap, they approve, and you learn something dangerous. Feeling bad gets me nothing, but pretending gets me love. So you perform, you distract, you smile on cue, and it works, until you grow up. And now the pain is louder, but your mask is louder too. The pleasure? It becomes a performance, louder than your loneliness, louder than your needs, louder than that small voice inside that just wants to be seen. Jung knew this cycle. He watched it in patients, in history, in himself. He said, pleasure, when used unconsciously, becomes the enemy of the soul. Not because pleasure is wrong, but because we've made it a drug. We use it not to feel more, but to feel less. And that is what's starving us. If this is hitting something deep, if it feels like I'm speaking straight into a part of you you've never let anyone touch, pause, take a breath. And if you're ready to go deeper, subscribe. Not for me, for you. So this kind of truth finds you again. And if you've ever looked at your phone or plate or lover and thought, why do I still feel so empty? Tell me below. That moment. Because saying it out loud is how we take our power back. Now come closer. Because this isn't the end, it's the beginning. The moment you start questioning your cravings is the moment you start remembering who you were before the numbness began. Let's go there. Let me show you the trap. Imagine a person lost in a desert. They see water shimmering in the distance. They run. But when they get there, it's gone. Just heat. Just sand. Just another illusion. But do they stop? No. They see another one, and another, and each time they swear, this one is real. That's how most people live. Not chasing happiness, but chasing relief. Not seeking truth, but running from discomfort, calling the mirage pleasure, because they're too afraid to name the real thirst underneath. You've seen it. You've lived it. The scroll that never ends. The food that tastes good and leaves guilt. The messages to someone you know isn't good for you, but it feels better than being alone. We don't want pleasure. We want interruption. We want anything to distract us from the mirror we're too scared to look into. But real pleasure is different. It's not loud. It doesn't buzz. It doesn't hijack your senses. Real pleasure is quiet, patient. It doesn't scream for your attention. It expands your presence. It's in finishing a hard thing you once feared. It's in a conversation where you were fully seen. It's in waking up and realizing you no longer crave what once owned you. But that kind of pleasure, it's inconvenient. It demands something from you, your attention, your honesty, your effort. So we skip it and go back to the easy kind. But the easy kind is killing us. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And pleasure, my friend, is the most beautiful absurdity we've ever invented. Let me rewind it for you. Back to childhood. You fall, scrape your knee. It hurts. You cry. But instead of someone holding space for your pain, they rush in with a cookie, or a toy, or a screen. "Don't cry," they say. "Shaky. Here, this will make it better." And it does, for a moment. But something else happens too. Your nervous system learns pain is inconvenient, feeling is weakness, and the fix? Pleasure. So you grow. And your brain becomes fluent in a language that never speaks the truth. You don't say, I'm hurting. You say, "Let's get drinks." You don't say, "Well, I'm lonely." You say, "Let's scroll." You don't say, I'm empty. You say, "Let's shop, let's eat, let's flirt." And that becomes your new normal. But underneath it, still the same wounded child, waiting, still the same ache, unspoken. Because every time you reach for stimulation instead of facing what's real, you lose a little more intimacy with your true self. Jung saw this. He said the inner world, when ignored, doesn't disappear. It gets louder. And what is pleasure in today's world, if not the loudest thing in our lives? The buzz, the ping, the binge, the blast of color and sound and sweetness meant to drown out the quiet voice inside that says, "I need something deeper." But we don't listen. We sedate. We soothe. We call it self-care. We call it freedom. But if you need it to feel okay, you're not free. You're owned. Now pause. Have you ever felt guilt after something that was supposed to bring joy? One more episode. One more drink. One more message to someone you shouldn't have texted. That guilt? It's not shame, it's your body whispering, "You didn't feed me. You avoided me." That's what most people miss about shadow work. They think it's about becoming some edgy version of yourself. But that's not it. Shadow work is this: looking at the moments you abandon your truth for quick relief and saying, "I see you, I won't lie to you anymore." Let me give you a story. There was someone who couldn't stop chasing love. They called themselves a hopeless romantic. But every relationship was the same: fast, intense, obsessive, and always a crash. When asked why, they said, "I just love love." But it wasn't love. It was distraction. It was anesthesia with a pretty face. Because when they were alone, the silence screamed. And they'd never learned how to sit with their own wounds. So they kept running from one form of pleasure to the next, until their whole life became a trail of temporary highs and permanent emptiness. And here's the part that hurts. This story isn't rare. It's not unique. It's millions. People who confuse longing with love, scrolls with joy, numbing with healing. But here's where everything begins to shift. When you finally ask yourself, why do I need this? Not why do I want it? Not is it bad? But what is it covering? Because once you name the wound, the craving loses its power. That's where we'll go next. Let's flip the mirror now. Because for most of your life, you've been taught to fear the wrong thing. You were taught to fear stillness, but not the chaos that keeps you from yourself. You were taught to fear boredom, but not the noise that drowns your truth. You were taught to fear silence, but not the stories that silence was begging you to hear. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in a room with no screen, no music, no food, no phone, just you? No escape hatch, no instant fix, no digital anesthesia, just breath, just presence, just the sound of your own soul, unfiltered. If that idea makes your skin crawl, good. You're closer to freedom than you think. Because stillness only hurts when it's filled with everything you've been avoiding. Carl Jung knew this. He saw how people mistake stimulation for living. He said most neurosis doesn't come from trauma. It comes from what we never confront after. And the fastest way to never confront it? Pleasure. Used without awareness, pleasure becomes the most beautiful trap. It tells you just one more scroll, just one more bite, just one more message. And every time you say yes, you're not soothing your pain, you're postponing your power. Here's the truth most people never say out loud. You don't need more pleasure, you need more presence. Because real pleasure, the kind that makes your lungs expand, your mind quiet, your soul soften, doesn't come from consuming, it comes from connecting. To your effort, to your courage, to your truth. Think back for a second. What was the last thing you did that took effort, discipline, delayed gratification, and afterward you felt alive? That's not just pride, that's not just a good job pat on the back. That's your nervous system finally trusting you again. Because discipline is deeper than control, it's self-trust. And trust is the real high. When you trust yourself, you don't chase the feeling. You choose it, fully, freely, without fear. That's when pleasure becomes beautiful again. Not as an escape, but as a celebration. But the world won't reward that. The world profits off your craving. It feeds your distraction, then sells you the cure for the emptiness it created. You can feel this loop, can't you? Swipe. Guilt, buy, regret, click, crash. It's not your fault. You were raised in it, conditioned for it. But now, you have the power to break it. Let me give you something real. Imagine walking into a quiet room. No distractions, no tasks, just you. But instead of panic, you feel at home. Not because you achieved inner peace, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. That's what Jung called individuation, not perfection, not detachment, not becoming some untouchable monk in a cave, but wholeness. The ability to enjoy pleasure without needing it to numb pain. The ability to be alone and still feel complete. The ability to face your feelings without flinching. That's not weakness, that's mastery. And most people never get there because they confuse healing with constant positivity, constant comfort, constant pleasure. But healing isn't soft, it's honest. And honesty means this: I will no longer use pleasure to pretend I'm okay. Now, before we go deeper, if this message is hitting somewhere you can't name, if it's pulled a thread in your chest, don't just sit with it, share it. Drop a comment with one moment that echoed something true inside you. And subscribe, not for numbers, but to stay connected to the part of you that's finally waking up. Because this next part, it's where everything shifts. We're not talking in theory anymore. We're going to name it. The moment you betrayed yourself. The time you said yes when you meant no. The night you called them when you knew they weren't right. The snack, the click, the scroll. Not because you wanted it, but because you couldn't bear what came before it. You weren't feeding yourself. You were sedating your soul. And when you finally admit that, without shame, without judgment, without running, you become untouchable. Because no one can manipulate a person who no longer uses pleasure to forget who they are. That's where we go next. The real reason your cravings won't leave, and how to make peace with the part of you you've been numbing all along. Let's rewind time, not for nostalgia, but for evidence. You were 5, maybe 6. You scraped your knee, tears welled up, and someone handed you a cookie, or turned on a cartoon, or said, "Stop crying, be strong." And in that tiny moment, a rule was written in your nervous system. Pain is a problem. Emotions make people uncomfortable. So, distract them. And just like that, you learned the great lie of this world. Pleasure is safer than presence. You didn't mean to become addicted. You were trained to, because society doesn't teach emotional fluency. It teaches substitution. Smile instead of scream. Scroll instead of speak. Consume instead of confront. And so the years pass. And now you're here, not broken, just layered, not lost, just looped. Still reaching for that snack, that fix, that message you shouldn't send. Not because you're weak, but because the ache beneath has never been witnessed. Carl Jung warned, when the inner world is ignored, the outer world becomes louder. And what is pleasure if not the loudest thing in your life? The ding, the scroll, the binge, the buzz, each one screaming, "Don't look inward, look here." But here's what no one tells you. Every time you reach outward to patch what's aching inward, you trade intimacy with yourself for a hit of temporary comfort. And it's not your fault. You were told that feeling good is the same as being okay, but it's not. Feeling good can be the most seductive lie of all. Let me bring this closer. You know that post-pleasure guilt? The kind that whispers after the binge, after the late-night text, after the impulse buy. That guilt isn't shame, it's truth. It's the whisper from within that says, I didn't need that. I needed something deeper. But most people don't listen, because listening means slowing down, and slowing down means feeling, and feeling means finally meeting the parts of you you've tried to outrun. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who said she was addicted to love, always chasing the next spark, the next obsession, the high of being wanted. But every relationship ended the same: intensity, chaos, crash. And when someone asked her why, she said, I just love love. But that wasn't true. She didn't love love. She feared loneliness. She feared silence. She feared meeting the parts of her that were still bleeding underneath the pretty performances. So relationships became her escape, her distraction, her favorite brand of anesthesia. This story, it's not unique. It's the hidden biography of millions, people who confuse intensity with intimacy, scrolls with joy, numbing with healing. The danger isn't that we crave pleasure. The danger is that we never ask why. Why that third drink? Why that 2 a.m. message? Why that extra episode when you're exhausted? What are you trying to avoid? Here's the myth that must be destroyed. Pleasure is not healing. Pleasure is not peace. Pleasure is not self-love. Pleasure is a tool. And any tool used unconsciously becomes a weapon. So let's flip the script. Think of the last time you didn't give in. You paused. You sat with the ache. You said no to the easy thing. And hours later, you felt proud. That pride, that clarity, that clean peace. That's not a dopamine hit. That's self-trust. That's your system finally recognizing safety. Not because you numbed the pain, but because you honored it. Carl Jung knew that transformation isn't about white-knuckling your way to joy. It's about learning to sit with the parts of you that you once silenced with sugar, with sex, with scrolling. So what does it actually look like? It looks like this. You're reaching for your phone. Pause. Ask, what am I avoiding? You're opening the fridge. Pause. Ask, what do I actually feel right now? You're about to text someone you swore you were done with. Pause. Ask, is this love or is this loneliness in disguise? These tiny pauses, they are revolutions because they break the loop. They teach your body that you no longer run from yourself, that you are safe in stillness, that your silence is not a punishment, it's a portal. The goal isn't to never feel craving. The goal is to become curious when you do, to turn every craving into a question. What am I truly hungry for? Because real pleasure, the kind that fills you instead of empties you, is slow. It requires effort, presence, deliberate choice, and it's worth everything. The best laughter is with someone you trust. The best food is after real hunger. The best connection is after vulnerability, not validation. So here's the pivot point. You've seen the mask slip. You've watched the illusion begin to dissolve. Now comes the courage to stop numbing, to start meeting yourself, raw, real, unfinished, and loving what you find anyway. So here we are, no more detours, no more sugar-coated half-truths, just this moment and the ache beneath it. Because if we're being honest, there's something terrifying about admitting the truth that hides in silence. You have betrayed yourself, not with cruelty, not with malice, but in quiet ways, in familiar patterns, in soft whispers that said, just this once, just 5 more minutes, this makes me feel better. When really, it helped you forget. Forget the wound you never named. Forget the emptiness you dressed up as independence. Forget the longing you buried under laughter and likes. And listen, this isn't about shame. This is about waking up. You weren't broken, you were surviving. And survival comes with its own kind of blindness. But now you can see. And once you see, you can't go back. Because the scroll won't soothe you like it did. The hookup won't validate like it promised. The binge won't quiet the voice inside that says, there has to be more than this. Because there is. The real hunger was never for pleasure. It was for presence, for stillness, for truth. Not the truth that's performative. The truth that rattles your bones. The truth that says, I want to live without needing to escape my life. Let me give you a picture. Imagine your life as a house and inside it lives your wounded child, your forgotten grief, your realest self. But instead of walking through the front door, you throw a party on the lawn. You string up lights, you blast music, you hand out sugar and scrolls and surface-level smiles. And your inner child? Still waiting, still unheard, still hoping someone finally comes inside. That's what false pleasure does. It decorates the outside of your life so you never have to face what's waiting within. But healing is different. Healing is quiet. It walks inside, takes off its shoes, sits down on the floor, looks your pain in the eye and says, "I'm here now, speak." That's what Jung meant by integration. He didn't want people to be perfect. He wanted them to be whole, to stop amputating their truth for the comfort of convenience. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and becoming who you are means facing everything you once fled." Now here's the final myth that must die. Pleasure is the goal. Happiness means feeling good. Freedom means doing what you want. Wrong. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is not needing to. Real power is when the craving comes and you don't flinch, you don't chase, you don't escape. You sit with it, you breathe, you listen. And in that moment you realize, you are not your hunger. You are the one who chooses how to feed it. True pleasure? It's not the chocolate, not the dopamine, not the ego stroke. It's the quiet knowing that you don't have to run anymore. It's the peace that comes from presence, from integrity, from stillness that doesn't punish, but heals. And when you live from that place, people will notice. They'll say, "You've changed. You're quieter. You don't chase the highs anymore." And they won't understand why you don't drink as much, why you stopped needing applause, why you take longer to respond. But that's okay, because they won't see that you've stopped abandoning yourself, that you've become powerful, unmanipulable, undistracted, present. And presence is rebellion in a world addicted to escape. You'll still laugh, still love, still taste the sweetness of life, but you'll do it awake. You won't trade peace for stimulation. You won't confuse silence with lack. You'll understand. The pleasure you don't have to chase is the only kind worth keeping. So when the next craving comes, pause. Not to punish, not to suppress, but to ask the question that changes everything. What do I truly need right now? Because that question, that one question, is a doorway. It's the exit from the loop, the return to yourself, the beginning of your real life. And that right there is the moment you'll never look at pleasure the same again. Not because it's wrong, but because now you finally see it clearly. And when you can see the illusion, you no longer bow to it, you rise.